Welcome Internet to Psychologist Casual Review, and today we're going to be reviewing The Eternal Ones of the Dream, a book written by Géza Róheim. So this book is a perfect blend between anthropology, as it's going to talk about the myths, rituals, and culture of the Aborigines, namely the Pitjantjatjara and the Aremda tribes in Central Australia, mixed in with psychoanalytic interpretations, as Géza Róheim was basically an anthropologist and an analyst, a practicing analyst at the same time. He himself was analyzed by forensic. So he has a lot of stuff to say in both what the culture is and on what interpretations could be drawn from basically this Aboriginal cultures and frameworks. So he starts out by explaining that Aboriginal tales are not necessarily like our Western tales because they don't have necessarily the same framework of reference. That there's a lot of space, a lot of emphasis in the Aboriginal tales put on just on the fact of moving from one point to another, or something that has happened but might have been considered menial to us Westerners, but would be very important for the Aborigines. Like, for example, a rock where someone has slept is called a sleep because someone has slept there, and they're going to go into massive detail on the rock and why people slept there and why it was important. But nothing is going to happen at that rock. Like, there's no plot twist, right, at that rock. It's just the ancestors have slept there, and that's why it's important. So there's a lot of elements like that. Also, very importantly, Aboriginal culture is very rich in all of those details. The land really means something. The landmarks are very important for them for two very important reasons. First and foremost, the Aborigines have this idea, at least in this book, that's what he presents, Róheim presents, that the Aborigines feel that where they're born has an incredibly deep impact, because as they are born, there is something of the land that's born in them. So how does it work? Well, in Aboriginal folklore, there's this idea that basically as one is born, his soul is linked with an eternal one of the dream. So this is a translation Róheim makes of this idea that there would be an ethereal ancestor that lives in for example, in a cave or basically in a part of the land which is hidden, but he's a double that is very important and because basically he's both the individual but also the ancestors and all the people that are going to come after the individual. And basically that eternal one of the dream is the part that infuses the soul into the infant. That basically the infant is not just created by a sexual act, but is also part and parcel of the tribe and of its history. So very fundamentally, where you're born also indicates the soul that you possess and why it's there. And the eternal one of the dream is someone or an entity that will never age, that will never grow old, that's basically always there, and even if you die, the soul goes back to it and is reincarnated with another infant. Therefore, it's never really over, and it's this cycle. It's not necessarily like Buddhism per se, but that eternal one of the dream is so very important. And if ever they're disturbed, the individual might feel pain. At least that's what the Aborigines felt. If you disturb the eternal one of the dream, then you'd feel the suffering. And fundamentally, there are objects like churanga. So I'm sorry, I'm not 100% sure I can pronounce it correctly, but this idea that there are slabs of wood or stone that basically represent the ancestors and should only be left in specific spaces or places or landmarks. And if ever they're moved, then the individual will feel pain or fall sick or will have misery brought upon them. So it's very important for the Aborigines to have those symbolic objects remaining where they should remain for the sake of the tribe and of the individual. Now, what's very interesting in what Róheim presents is that the Aborigines have this dual hero myth, and one is going to be very important because basically in Aboriginal tales it seems to be less about the individual but about the collective, about the tribe, and the dual heroes are often true. It can be a brother and a father. It can be two brothers. But this idea is that there's always a double. The individual is never really alone. Therefore, it's very interesting because one could say, is there an individual? Because in some versions of it, like Nanga and Juliana, I hope I'm saying it right. Basically, it's not just like father and son, but it's also individual and penis. So, and in some tales, it's that like the individual and the other is a body part of the former. So, in these cases, we can see that there's always a connection, a deep connection of individuals to one another, a collective rather than an individual. Also, very interesting fact is that in the Aborigines perspective, rituals are divided between men and women, that they don't have the same rituals. So children are often part of the female world up until a certain point, if they're men, right, or if they're boys. So how it works is that basically men have their rituals that are very sacred to them and should never be seen by a woman, but women also have their rituals that are very sacred and should not be seen by men. And very interestingly enough, as an analyst, he points out that men don't necessarily, for example, appreciate women or feel that they're inferior. How it works in the Aboriginal system, at least what he points out, is that men sometimes are envious of women's bodies. For example, menstruation is seen by the Aborigines as a gift in which women purify themselves through menstruation. Therefore, men have to have a sub-incision, i.e. cut part of the rectum that goes to the anus to bleed in the same way as women. So basically, men themselves acquire a sort of vagina through sub-incision. And Róheim explains that this is basically a way of having both genders into one for men, and basically how it's very involved in their rituals, because what happens is that the boy becoming a man has to basically an older man that has a sub-incision has to sit upon them, i.e. what Róheim explains is that they have to be reborn, and basically they go from mother to father. And very interestingly enough, when the boy is initiated and when he succeeds his initiation, he doesn't just become a man, he becomes a father, because at that point he's allowed to marry and basically perpetuate the tribe, and he himself becoming a father. So very interestingly, what Róheim says is that the child basically goes from woman and being dependent upon women to becoming a man and being dependent upon men. So basically men become like a second version of mother, which is very interesting because what he's going to point out is that through that, becoming a second mother, the men are basically both bringing in the boy into the man's world, but also controlling him, saying that basically he, the initiate, owes them something, that they are not replaceable. It's not because they're old that they can be overpowered by the young initiates, that they have to be respectful, because basically the respect that they owe their mother is also the respect they owe their now father. Also, very importantly and very interestingly enough, fatherhood is not biologically based. It's not about who has intercourse with who, right? That's irrelevant for the Aborigines, or close to being irrelevant. What is important is this symbolic aspect, that someone in the tribe is going to say, I'm the father. And that I am the father is what is important. And this is what is basically going to be fundamental. And even if that father dies, there will be other fathers, other uncles, people to take that symbolic function. And very interestingly enough, when Róheim explains to them that This is not how it works. Biologically, what creates the human is the intercourse. The Aborigines say that this is untrue. What creates a human are the rituals that they have added to the sex, but it's mostly the rituals that create the individual, and the father is important in those rituals. So very, very interesting how they conceptualized procreation in a very, very different way. Also, there are a lot of incredible information in this. For example, there's one of the myths of the moon father, which is basically the father of the horde. If you've read Freud, it's basically the same concept. Is a father that just couldn't stop raping women, except that unlike Freud, where it's the sons that kill the father, in this case, what happens is that it's the women that are fed up of being abused, mistreated, and raped by the father. Therefore, they castrate him to prevent him from hurting them any further. Therefore, there's much more agency given to women in Aboriginal culture, it seems, than in our Western culture, and when our myths are more putting them in a more passive or attentist regard, whereas the Aborigines, they're very, very active. Also, very important, women in the tribe and in the myths are the ones that basically invented the cutting stone for the foreskin. Very, very important fact, because one would think that cutting the foreskin is basically a man's affair, but apparently in the myths, and this is a constant in the Pitjantjatjara and their tribe, that basically the women give the tools for to remove the foreskin, and that it is an improvement because beforehand it was a fire stick. The circumcision was handled by burning the foreskin. Also, as I was saying earlier about purification, this idea that when the foreskin bleeds, it's a form of purification is also true. And in tribes where there is no circumcision, what happens is that in Victoria, for example, there are tooth evolution, meaning that they pull out a tooth. In all of these cases, what it brings us back to, as psychoanalysis always does, is castration anxiety. But for Róheim, it goes deeper than that, because what the tribes really fear is this image of the mother and the separation from the mother. Therefore, for Róheim, and this is his main point throughout the book, culture and civilization only exist in the fact of trying to control that anxiety of being abandoned by mother. For him, it goes even further, because Róheim was a Kleinian. So basically what he observed was that the Aborigines, often when they started hunting and killing and animals and to eat, right, and to use nature, for example, eating yams or eating vegetables, they would often have rituals in which basically they showed a form of gratitude towards nature. That form of gratitude was there to refuel nature, i.e. repair all the aggression that they had caused. And basically they felt that the animals would be reincarnated. And you had to leave a bit of time, right? But that in the end, the animals would come back because they were reincarnated. Therefore, in a way, they were not just killing them and that's it. They were killing them, eating them, but they would be reborn. So it was more okay-ish, right? And so what he analyzes through that is that the Aborigines, on an unconscious level, were afraid of a maternal imago that would be vengeful towards them. Therefore, they repaired it by having those special rituals, in which basically it was like, no, don't attack. We're good. We've done it. Everything's been repaired. Everything's fine. Don't act out. And he goes on to give myths in which basically Aboriginal men, for example, who have been separated from their mothers, seek them out. And so one might think that it's to rekindle a link to the mother. But no, in those myths, they when they reach their mothers, they kill them. They punish their mother for abandoning them. So here, his main theory is that abandonment anxiety and being separated from the mother, is the main cause of anguish for human civilization, and all our aims is there to try and negate this separation. And castration anxiety, as it exists in the Freudian sense, is more secondary to this form of abandonment and anxiety binded by the abandonment. Also, very interestingly enough, Róheim talks about the myth of a rainbow snake, Jörlungen. I think it's like that, Jörlungen. I'm not 100% sure about the pronunciation, but the idea behind it is that the rainbow snake is both father and mother combined, the fantasy of both assimilated, and they swallow everyone that passes. And the whole point of them is that the medicine man is born, i.e. the doctor is born by being swallowed by it, and then swallowing little versions of the rainbow snake inside of him. And this creates a scene where he basically has all the good objects in himself, and the ability, because there's, in the Aboriginal beliefs, there's this idea that the rainbow snake has plenty of good things inside, and therefore if you're inside of it and you have one inside of you, a little rainbow snake, you possess all the good qualities of that superpower and supernatural entity, right? So very interestingly enough, of course, when I'm in Swallow, they have rituals like that where they will symbolize a snake, and the snake will swallow, they might be, how can I say, on the form of stove, or men will sit on them, and that's a symbolization of the snake. And therefore, see, it's all symbolic, right? It's not like they get a snake and they eaten by it. Of course not. It's much more, it's like the rituals we have in Christianity, in which basically we give us the hostie and the wine and say, this is the blood and this is the body of the Christ, right? It's all merged in symbolism, right? And so, very importantly, what he says is that Aborigines, contrary to what people have argued, do not wander the land through sheer pleasure. They wander the land because they have to, because resources might dry up or become low. Therefore, they have to move in order to survive. And that it's not a natural state. It's not something that they like doing, because it requires a lot of effort, a lot of will to like move from one state to another, especially given the fact that for most of them they have emotional attachment to the land where they were born, of the saying it's the best, it's the greatest, and so on and so forth. So they don't really want to move, but they do it because they have to. And he had this little experiment in which he gave them a bit of food and enough to last a certain time, and they stopped moving during that time, thus showing that basically it's hard and it's very effortful. Also, very importantly, for the Aborigines, this whole dynamic of finding food is also kind of sometimes a form of war between sexes. How so? Well, men will often in certain tribes have a totem, like let's say a special form of bird, and women will have their special bird, right? And sometimes to resolve conflict, it will be about who kills the most totemic animals. Like if women can kill more man birds than the men can kill women birds, that solves the conflict. So a very interesting way of handling the tensions that's bound to happen when people live together, and how they fundamentally try and cope with this experience. And another thing that I found very important and very, very essential is that Róheim quotes everything. Like, I mean, I've rarely seen someone so involved into the details of which tribe did what, who quotes them, how it works out. He even says, and I found it very brave of his part, And that when he has a doubt on a certain data from another anthropologist, he will point it out, he will mention it. I also have to say that Róheim, I feel, is brilliant, but he's not original in his analysis. For example, he's going to quote Freud, Klein, Ferenczi, but he's not going to go out of his way to theorize something new. He uses what is already available in, let's say, the 1920s, 1930s to theorize, but he's not going to create his own set of theories to explain what is happening. Quite the opposite. He's very tame for an analyst. Also, and this will be one of the final points, the Aborigines have a whole subset of rituals linked with blood. So blood is very important, as is semen. Semen is and breast milk are seen as something that's restorative and reparative. I.e., it's not uncommon for Aborigines, for example, to use semen to speed up the cauterization of certain wounds or to try and heal from illness. In the same way, blood can be used like that. The bloodletting, or for example, or drinking the blood of someone else, binds two people together. And what Róheim explains is that the blood here is basically like the milk of the mother's breast. It's something that creates a bond, and it's very strong because apparently you could even make someone drink your blood and they will not be able to betray you, which is what certain Aborigines did to other Aboriginal scouts, saying, oh, you've drank our blood, therefore you can't betray us, you can't tell your tribe that we're coming to get you. So very interesting. So it's very, very formalized. Blood is intertwined with magic, and there's this idea that fundamentally life flows through blood, and blood has a very important meaning. And for example, for young women that menstruate, it's not rare for older women to recuperate the blood of the menstruation and to use it on the girls so that they can have better skin, a better body, not in terms of attractiveness, but in terms of strength and how to survive in this harsh world, because the Aboriginal world is a hard world, a ruthless one that doesn't allow for mistakes, or not like in our Western civilizations. And moving on to the next point, which is important as well, is this idea that basically, because it's a ruthless world, parents are often, like I say, forced to push the child into a form of maturity, that the parents are scary and the child realizes that very early on. Therefore, for Róheim, this connects with all the fantasies of being destroyed, being afraid, and also dependent, and you're so dependent upon the tribe that creates in the individual a lot of fears of being abandoned. And that's what's central in the tribes Róheim saw, rather than castration anxiety proper. It's abandonment, so very central, because without the tribe you can't do anything. Without the tribe you're lost. So very important again. And fundamentally, the last thing I wanted to say before I end this video is that it's a very, very rich text, a very important book if you're even remotely interested in Aboriginal culture. I have learned a lot of things that I haven't had the time to talk to, like for example, ritual magic, love magic, for example, using the bull roarer, which is a form of like tool that makes a special noise that, according to Róheim, is close to when there's an sexual intercourse, which is meant to bring out women. And basically, they have a whole set of rules and magic that's both there to seduce, but also there to try and protect against the relationship or against the other. He calls it anti-relational magic, or magic against the object, because the people might be so afraid of the relationship and of the destructive side of it that they have to protect with special magic to seduce and to protect. And that's pretty much it for this video. So it's quite different from usual, but I hope you found it interesting. If you have any questions, anything you'd like to point out, or anything you think I overlooked, feel free to do so in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.